Okay, last set of squats, going to the river, but before that, news. Rohan Goswami, CNBC. Court filings. Binance's lawyers allege SEC Chair Gary Gensler offered to be an advisor to the company in March 2019 when he was teaching at MIT's Sloan School. Related, Colin Wilhelm LeBlanc. Court documents. The SEC accuses Binance and Binance US of redirecting over $12 billion in customer assets to entities controlled by Changpeng Zhao between 2019 and 2021. Also related, Emily Nicole Bloomberg. The SEC's Binance lawsuit includes testimony from ex-Binance US CEO Catherine Coley, who joined in 2019 before suddenly leaving 2 years later without a trace. Okay, so three big pieces on the board. The person who's the chair of the SEC, before they were the chair of the SEC, according to Binance, offered to advise the firm. Something tells me they weren't offering to do that for free. Piece number two, the SEC asserts that the founder of Binance had at some point exclusive control over $12 billion worth of customer funds. And then piece number three, the person who was running the US subsidiary of Binance joined in 2019 and left without a trace. I don't want to say peak crypto malarkey, but this smells like it. John Gruber, Daring Fireball. Apple Vision Pro impressions after 30 minutes of use. Extraordinary tech, heavier than expected. Vision OS is a breakthrough, incredible for sports, and more. I read John's whole piece. The one of a handful of themes that I keep coming away with as I read more coverage and having watched the keynote and the State of the Union, the notion of spatial computing, one of the core concepts there that I think is going to be tremendously interesting and valuable for human beings using machines to accomplish things, is the idea of a particular tool or application or environment that's represented by software can exist in a particular place within the physical environment that the user occupies. Gruber makes this analogy to the Mac being an intellectual place, right? That things happen in the Mac, and that when you're using the machine, your brain goes to that place. John Siracusa has talked for years and years about the notion of the spatial finder. If I remember correctly, it was the way Mac OS was initially, and then very quickly migrated away from. The idea that, again, what this product does or doesn't become isn't interesting. It's more about what does this product indicate about where we're going to be in 5 years. I think one of the interesting components is going to be the idea that in 5 years you will have a notion that certain activities that you use a machine to accomplish exist in certain places. And that you can obviously pick up all those activities and move somewhere else. You can go sit in the park, or you can go sit in your bedroom, or you can go, I don't know, float on a pool toy. But the notion that my web browser is over there, but right now I'm looking at the faces of the people that I'm on a call with, like that idea, as opposed to everything I do with a machine exists within this rectangle, that I think is going to be especially interesting to watch over time. David Pierce, The Verge. WhatsApp announces Channels, a one-to-many broadcast tool that is, quote, a private way to follow what matters, unquote, and plans to add payment services in the future. Cool. WhatsApp continuing to evolve. I'm all for it because it understands the floor of a modern communications tool, which is end-to-end encryption, right? Providing a reasonable expectation of privacy when you're interacting with others over the network. I can't help but look at this though and say, WhatsApp is going to build the means for users to broadcast while maintaining some form of privacy, and they're going to add the means of transacting value. There's all of those who sort of criticize Elon's belief that what Twitter needs to become is an everything app akin to WeChat in China. If Facebook understands, or excuse me, if Meta understands that that's the logical conclusion for WhatsApp, I don't know that you can reasonably respect their strategic vision and then deride Elon's strategic vision. You can deride Elon all day long. Like, he's the meme lord in chief. Nobody's going to dispute that. But again, deride him and then look at how many cars are on the road that don't use gasoline that weren't there 5 or 10 years ago. Look at how many rockets are being reused instead of just like turning into space junk. Like, the proof is in the pudding with Elon more so than many other people. And so if WhatsApp is moving in this direction, we're going to get to a place where Twitter is going to have exactly the same feature set, right? Where group DMs in Twitter are going to become more useful. One-on-one DMs, those private communications that you have a reasonable expectation are private, will become more normal. And then how do you transact value? There's no reason that Venmo is its own app. Venmo is a feature of something else. And that's, I think, the future I would rather live in. So whether WhatsApp delivers it or Twitter delivers it or iMessage delivers it, no, it's not going to work because it'll never be cross-platform. Ash Parrish, The Verge. Twitch walks back new branded content guidelines released on June 6th, calling them, quote, bad for streamers and the company after swift backlash from creators. Kind of a crisis of authority story. Feels like the right magnet to snap to. I presume that the branded content guidelines were there for Twitch to try and institute some clarity between when someone is talking about something on a stream because there's a direct financial incentive for them to talk about it versus not. That's not going to last long, right? You can look to YouTube as the example here. People have been sponsored to speak about one product or another on YouTube for over 10 years. And to my knowledge, YouTube doesn't do a whole lot to enforce any sort of guideline. My experience, at least as a user, nobody's offered to sponsor me. I pay for all my weights. Hey, York Barbell. The impression that I get as an end user is that it's about the honor amongst the individual creator to say, hi, I'm going to be transparent with you and say that the reason I'm talking about this particular product is that I was offered one in exchange for my unbiased opinion on it. To the extent to which you believe that is a function of how much sort of belief and trust you put in one creator versus another. Will Douglas Heaven, MIT Technology Review. DeepMind's AlphaDev, an AI for discovering enhanced algorithms, devise new C++ sorting algorithms that are up to 70% faster and have been added to the language. Talk about an example of how human beings don't conceive of problems in the same way that machines do. Maybe the more effective way to put that is we're not capable of thinking about a problem in, I don't know how to phrase this without sort of giving beingness to a machine. C++, not a new language, not a thing that I would have at least guessed there was room for 70% improvement in one area or another. I don't know what the denominator is. I don't know how much a 70% faster sorting algorithm translates to in terms of shorter compile time, that being the single most effective metric. I don't know. I don't write code. But the notion that we were able to build a piece of software that then went off and found massive improvements in an aspect of a coding language that's, I mean, it's damn near as old as I am. That's wild. Amazing. Keep it up. Kyle Wiggins, TechCrunch. Google updates how Bard handles math, coding questions, and string manipulations via quote-unquote implicit code execution, which lets the chatbot run code in the background. Another coding story, another AI in everything story. I'm not well versed enough to understand what it means to handle string manipulation or code questions differently using implicit code execution. I assume what this means from the last bit of text here about how the chatbot can run code in the background is that you can feed it a question that involves code and it can spin up a little sandbox and basically test what you're asking for. But that's pure speculation on my part. So AI in everything. Camille Shumba, CoinDesk. The UK's FCA plans to introduce tough crypto advertising rules, classifying crypto as quote-unquote restricted mass market investments, banning incentives to invest, and more. We shall see where we shake out on crypto malarkey versus real utility, and I'm glad that there's a pocket of humanity that's going to run the experiments on what happens with more regulation as opposed to less, or at least clear regulation as opposed to opaque. Miles Krupa, Wall Street Journal. Internal email. Google plans to include office attendance records in performance reviews and consider new requests to work remotely full-time as an exception. Not a great look for a business that is as ludicrously profitable as Google's is. I would love to be a fly on the wall and see the data that they almost certainly aren't willing to publicize that supports the thesis that they get better performance out of their workforce when their workforce are all in a particular building. Say what you will about the need to move fast in competitive industries, but my core belief is that the only thing that is demonstrably sacrificed when your workforce is distributed and everyone isn't under the same roof is maybe speed. Maybe you ship products faster and make business decisions quicker if everyone is on the same under the same roof on the same campus. Maybe it's easier to get the right people into a room in order to have a conversation, in order to move forward. But I, for whatever gains Google believes they may get out of encouraging people to default to coming to the office, I have to wonder what talent drain they're going to suffer as a result. And say what you will about, you know, are the are the are your A-list players going to leave? Maybe, maybe not. Or more of your C-list players going to leave? Perhaps more likely. We'll see. Aaron Griffith, New York Times. Tech entrepreneurs who left the Bay Area during the pandemic are returning, saying they can't miss out on the funding, hackathons, and networking of the AI boom. The counter argument to most work that is done on laptops can and should be done in a distributed fashion because it allows for the individual human to live an optimized existence and therefore contribute more. The counter argument to that is the Bay Area. It is the fact that this industry was born, for the most part, out of a incredibly small geographic region where you have a super high concentration of motivated, talented people working on defining the state of the art. And the bottom line is, like, if those people are all in the same space, they're more likely to spend more time together and bump into each other and challenge each other to think differently about the challenges that they face. Like, that's the upside of Silicon Valley. It's why Silicon Valley is not likely to stop being Silicon Valley for quite some time. Will there be other areas of the tech industry broadly where material innovation and growth and progress are achieved with distributed teams? Yes, of course, no question. But there are going to be certain pockets on the planet that will continue to have tailwind because of the compounding effects of all of that human capital and all of that human imagination in small spaces. Paris is never going to stop being Paris. London's never going to stop being London. Tokyo's never going to stop being Tokyo. Beijing's never going to stop being Beijing. Silicon Valley's never going to stop being Silicon Valley. Will other things grow? Yes. But I don't think that that effect of geographic proximity is immediately going out of style. Esther Weber, Politico. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak plans to host an AI summit in the fall, saying the United Kingdom would be, quote unquote, well placed to convene discussions. Attendees are unclear. Obviously related to the previous story, right? If you have a major population center, a tier one city of planet Earth, you absolutely want to encourage whatever is the new thing to be something that happens in your jurisdiction. So not surprising at all. Are you able to pull it off from a top-down position of authority and say, like, I am in charge of this city or this nation state, and therefore I will say that we can be a place for X to happen? Maybe that's possible, but I think it's organic more than command and control that wins the day with those sort of things. Matt Levine, Bloomberg. A look at what the SEC and crypto industry learned from the SEC's ICO enforcement actions in 2017. why the SEC is targeting only select tokens, and more. Matt Levine, always worth reading if you care at all about crypto malarkey or the theme of a crisis of authority, probably worth reading. Samritha Arunasalam, Reuters. GameStop fires CEO Matt Furlong 2 years after hiring him and anoints chairman and majority shareholder Ryan Cohen as its executive chairman. GME drops more than 15%. I feel not great about wanting to invoke the Michael Dell Apple quote, certainly not twice in such a short period of time, as I'm pretty sure I used it last week. But how is the right solution for GameStop anything other than liquidate it and give the money back to shareholders? Maybe there's a long tail of revenue to be found in being the retail location all over every country where GameStop does business, where young people, well, age isn't a function here, where people who are interested in video games can go and buy and sell video games and other forms of entertainment, whether they're computer entertainment or not. Yeah, is there a place for that? Sure. I just think it looks more like there's a shop here in the Triangle where you can go and play a tabletop board game, buy tabletop board games and the components of them, as well as comic books and old N64 cartridges and like all that model of this is a gathering space for people who are passionate about some aspect of what we broadly refer to as gaming. That makes sense. The last time I stepped into a GameStop, that's not what it was. It was a relic of the 1990s. It felt more like a Blockbuster Video, but for video games. If you don't have as much silver hair as me, you might not even get that reference. Then it did a thing that was a place that you would want to go and spend time. But I don't know. Ewan McCaskill, The Guardian. On the 10th anniversary of his revelations, Edward Snowden says he has, quote unquote, no regrets, and, quote unquote, 2013 seems like child's play versus current surveillance capabilities. Maybe this would be interesting to read. Maybe Snowden has some insight to offer. I don't doubt that he's absolutely correct, that the current surveillance capabilities are greater than ever before. The degree to which we all move toward living more and more of our lives inside of digital systems which are able to be snooped on only continues. But it's not that it wasn't important what he did. It's not that it wasn't important to, or isn't important to continue to attempt to shine a light on authorities abusing their responsibilities or their positions. But the older I get, the more I feel that while there should be this sort of work done so that people who are living in contentious circumstances can seek liberty and justice, we don't have that much time on this planet putting a lot of energy into just how much everyone's out to get you. Seems like a recipe for enjoying your brief moment on this planet less. Vulture. Hollywood insiders reflect on the end of, quote, peak TV, an era kickstarted by Netflix releasing House of Cards in one go in 2013 as streaming services cut back. I remember when House of Cards was released, and I remember how novel it was that you could consume all of the first season absolutely as fast as you could. And it kind of made sense because, I mean, they got David Fincher to do it, right? Like they gave one of the preeminent filmmakers of the last 50 years the ability to basically make a film that was 10 hours long and then provide beats where you would stop watching long enough to get up, use the toilet, get another snack, and then dive right back into that story. Streaming services cutting back. Yeah, you know why? It's not sustainable for any party involved to have the default mode to be we're going to produce 10 hours of media entertainment, right? 10 hours of prestige TV or 10 hours of cinema, whatever term you want to use to describe it, whether it's 10 hours or 8 hours or 15 hours, we're going to produce this lump of content. We're going to spend tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to do it, or in some cases, billions of dollars to do it. And then we're going to drop it all out into the market. We're going to own a particular part of the news cycle in exchange for dropping it out into the market, but for a very short period of time. Like, contrast this to, I'm really excited this year, maybe when summer has passed and starting to get cooler, to rewatch Lost, because Lost was the last thing that I remember watching where you just had to keep coming back every week. And the drama of paying attention into that story and understanding that story took months, years, and became another term that sort of dates me, water cooler conversation, because everyone watched it on the night that it came out, everyone who was interested, and then the next day had all these dialogues and all of this sort of cultural currency to exchange with one another that frankly the binge watching model, I would argue, kind of destroyed, because there are some people who will consume it all at once. There are some people who will dole it out over a period of time. And then frankly, there are people like me who will wait until it's all out so that I can consume it in my own pace and not have to wait for somebody else's schedule. So the whole thing is sort of fakaked, and I hope that we're going to get to a more mature way of dealing with this, because I want high quality cinematic entertainment to continue to be produced, but it's got to be done in a way that's sustainable for people who are making it and those of us who are just going to put our feet up and consume it. Bloomberg. Sources. TikTok is aiming for $20 billion in global e-commerce GMV in 2023, more than quadruple the 4.4 billion in 2022, after TikTok Shop's rapid growth in Southeast Asia. Yeah, that seems like a reasonable prediction, that you could quadruple the amount of money that you're generating by turning on the worldwide ability, at least worldwide, everywhere TikTok is allowed to operate, for someone to see something on the screen and press a minimal number of buttons in order to purchase that thing. This isn't a new idea. I mean, I remember reading a story, you want to talk about silver hair. David Spelling, who was the soap opera television producer and father of Tori Spelling, wanted to figure out how to allow you to purchase the garments you saw actors wearing in episodes of Melrose Place. This isn't a new idea. The fact that TikTok is going to turn it on kind of relates back to this story about WhatsApp from earlier. Social media tools are going to collapse on a common set of functionalities. And I mean, you have no better, you don't need to look any further than to look at Instagram and hear the anecdotal reports of people who are purchasing things because they're presented with ads in their Instagram feeds. All of these tools are going to settle in on the idea of, oh, you're consuming content, you saw a thing you'd like to have, we will make it absolutely as painless as possible for you to part with N number of dollars and for that thing to be on your doorstep N number of hours later. Anton Shilov, Tom's Hardware. SK Hynix begins mass producing its 238-layer 3D NAND flash storage chips, promising speeds of up to 2,400 MTs per second, up from the last generation's 176 layers and 1,600 MTs per second. I don't know what an MT is. I want to. I thought we were still measuring things in megabytes or gigabytes or terabytes. I hope that there's a direct translation between these numbers and one of those. But I'm glad to see that we've got progress in pushing the boundary of flash storage because the world kind of runs on it. William Gallagher, Apple Insider. Apple details features coming to its services this fall, like offline maps and real-time EV charging availability in Maps and collaborative playlists in music. I saw these during the keynote announcement. There's a whole category of things that Apple has at least announced will be appearing in their major platforms, starting this fall with the shipment of iOS 17 and iPadOS 17, and I'm sure some things will drag into next year because that's the pattern of the last 2 years. But taking these little bits of functionality that otherwise had to live in some siloed secondary application and making them a core part of the platform, we Mac nerds have a name for this. It's called Sherlocking. The reason it's called Sherlocking is there was a fantastic search tool that ran on the Mac. It was called, I think it was called Sherlock. I need to check my sourcing on this. And it was a beautiful tool, and Apple completely, relatively shamelessly, just took that entire set of ideas and baked them into the operating system. And there was a kerfuffle and there was frustration and consternation about the idea that someone who had spent their time building useful functionality had their business taken out from under them. Yeah, be unhappy about that if you want, but are we not going to wind up living in a better place 12 months from now when anyone with an iPhone out of the box can say, I'm going to go play in Zion National Park this weekend. I want all of the trail maps and all of the topographic information written to the NAND flash storage that lives inside the device, as opposed to having to rely on network connectivity or having to know to go get some third-party piece of software. It's a better world. Chris Stokel Walker, Fast Company. Adobe begins rolling out its generative AI Firefly tool to businesses and plans to offer, quote unquote, full indemnification against copyright lawsuits over its output. There's an interesting strategy that I didn't see coming. Makes sense. If you're Adobe, you have the balance sheet to offer that layer of protection to the people who use your tools. It's not a thing that I think anyone had to think about before this era. I'm not familiar with Microsoft ever having to communicate publicly that, you know, if you write something in Microsoft Word and then someone tries to sue you for it, that that Microsoft is going to help protect you. But copyright is where the rubber is going to meet the road on all of this stuff. And we're going to have a long conversation as a society about what it means to take inspiration from the work of others and produce new work. Dun 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 dun. Jay Peters, The Verge. Reddit creates an exemption from its unpopular new usage-based API pricing terms for quote unquote select developers of non-commercial apps that address accessibility needs. Usage-based APIs are not going anywhere. Everybody buckle up. The era of massive data sets living, growing, evolving out on the network, and those things being made available for effectively no money are not long for this world. We may get to a place where the content that I produce, I bear individual responsibility for hosting and making available on the network, in which case APIs to connect in an efficient way to where my data is represented versus where yours versus where theirs is. That's a world that we could live in. That looks a lot like IPFS. Could be interesting. But to the extent that businesses like Reddit or Meta or Instagram or Twitter continue to operate this hub and spoke model of everyone writes their data into this common data store and then we make it available, the mechanisms by which we make it available, they're not for charity. They never have been for charity. The exchange was always sort of misdirected or intentionally opaque because it was, hi, we're Gmail. We're going to offer you a state-of-the-art email experience that solves one or two of your fundamental utility challenges with email. It's hard to find the mail amongst all the mail you've ever received, and you constantly have to babysit your email in order to live underneath the storage quota. We're going to make all those things go away. All you have to do is click accept, and then you're off to the races. When you click accept, what you're saying is, we get to read absolutely every word of everything that you send and what anyone sends to you and feed that into our machine that produces advertising. And a little piece of that advertising is going to live in the window where you're doing your email so that we can go to the advertisers and say, every person who's using our mail client is a set of eyeballs that you can address. That was the exchange. It hasn't changed. So I'm glad that Reddit decided that there's some category of utility where you should be exempt from charges. But the problem there is somebody's going to ship a Reddit client for people with, hearing or vision challenges. How are people not going to swarm to that tool? Because it's what allows them to consume the Reddit data fire hose without having to use the first-party Reddit app. It's still early innings for social media. That's what this means. Bloomberg. GoTo CEO Andre Solistio plans to leave. A surprise move just months after detailing a profitability plan to be replaced by North Star partner Patrick Walujo. I don't know what GoTo does. North Star, In my brain, North Star means the live telemetry and customer support system that was baked into a lot of domestic cars sold in the United States in the 90s and aughties. Uh, Isaiah Poritz, Bloomberg Law. A radio host files a defamation lawsuit against OpenAI over ChatGPT's Hallucination, alleging it generated a false legal complaint accusing him of embezzlement. This could be interesting. My guess slash hope is that whatever judge this lawsuit gets in front of sort of dismisses this, because what is the difference in effect between OpenAI writing something that is untrue and libelous versus me saying something untrue and libelous? Sapna Maheshwari, New York Times. In a letter, two U.S. senators accuse TikTok of misleading Congress on the company's handling of U.S. user data, demanding answers to 12 plus questions by June 16th. Talk about it's in the crisis of authority bucket, but it's really its own sort of subcategory, which is the kabuki of authority. Their demand, like, they published publicly a list of questions that TikTok has to provide answers for and gave them 8 days to do it. Do you really believe that TikTok doesn't have the legal department necessary to produce and like responses which appear to sufficiently answer these questions while exposing the company's true or otherwise unspoken goals and behaviors to public scrutiny? This is going to be an absolute nothing burger. I continue to believe that the only TikTok story that matters is how quickly TikTok's feature set gets dismantled and disseminated across every other social app that operates in the US market. How quickly can YouTube Shorts consume all of what TikTok provides? How quickly can Twitter do it? How quickly can Instagram do it? I don't think this business is especially long for this world. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the network effects are meaningful. Human beings love to make the number go up, and TikTok is more than happy to lead people to believe that the number goes up. Whether that translates into anything of substance, though, is entirely other story, sir.